trying to accelerate a brand that does not create any sensory wow to differentiate it from competitors is more expensive than growing brands like Dr. Squatch. So this is just something I've pattern recognized in my work the last 7-8 years. Now, Dr. Squatch is famous for its wildly successful YouTube anchor video, probably most famous for that, and its now often mimicked opening line. But Dr. Squatch soap also offered most US soap buyers at the time a totally new, or at least a totally forgotten, experience of oddly colored, naturally scented, exfoliating cold-pressed soap bricks. I mean, that's a lot of adjectives. Everything about the design was man-forward and mannish. And, here's the thing, new on the national scene, outside of weird little gift stores. And Dr. Squatch's #1 selling SKU during the ramp-up period when I was working with them was the visually stunning pine tar brick with its heavy oatmeal grit. For guys, this was literally the opposite sensory experience of a lame white Dove bar. I mean, you're literally dripping with black liquid in the shower. It couldn't be more differentiated sensory experience than Dove white bar. I mean, I mentioned this cryptic topic of sensory experience no less than 30 different times in my book, Ramping Your Brand. Starting with the introduction. But very few of you peeps seem to have noticed any of them. The first mention is right on page 16, where I poke the topic as part of my definition of a commodity. Quote, by commodity, I mean a product purchased not for its uniquely memorable user experience, symbolic or sensory, but simply because it was at the right place at the right time. Sadly, many adorable founders like yourselves, probably including you, read my extensive discussion of product symbolism in the book and forgot all about the 30 references to the power of sensory differentiation. There's only so much I can do. I cannot grab you by the neck from the book page. Now, I know why this happened, but you may not. It's because readers saw an easy pack design change as their hope for acceleration, or a slight tweaking in sugar load or protein load, leading to a new packaging claim and new callouts. Just change the symbols and bam, we'll accelerate. This was the accidental result of how I wrote the book. Formula-related symbolism, especially nutritional symbolism, is very easy to explain in a book and to write about it in a book. It's really hard to describe sensory variables in words. Variables like flavor. I mean, what? The developers, quote unquote, that's a very flattering term for them. The developers of the modern English language, when they were not drinking mead excessively, were not foodies. Okay, like the scholars who codified the rules of classical Tamil 2,500 years ago. Don't ask me why I know that. Even medieval British aristocratic food was right, so to speak, because we know that the British stole it all from the French. Soufflé, reductions, fancy cakes. Downton Abbey kitchen scenes are just full of French talk. Go watch them. Anyways, my point here is that the Anglo-Saxon is not a foodie, and neither is their language. Okay, my point is that explaining symbolic language use on a package with more language in a book is just easier. Okay, and it's potentially easier to measure the impact of language changes as well if you believe the analytics behind firms like Designalytics. For example, when Once Upon a Farm put, quote, unquote, no added sugar at the top of its pouches in the dairy case, they received a nearly instantaneous acceleration in baseline velocities during a pandemic. No added sugar, it turns out, is a powerful promise in the yogurt case, full of added sugar. I cited this case in the second edition of the book, which you should grab if you didn't last year. And it probably has only reinforced, sadly, the misconception that acceleration is most easily done with a symbolic pack design change. Sigh. Look, language is just one signal. Okay? It's one signal class of visual sensory cues. And there are 4 other senses, people, that you can play with. Many powerful CPG brands tap the other senses, other than taste and sight. They go for smell and even aspects of touch, like how food feels in your mouth. Sensory design is the entire core of Frito-Lay, a not unsuccessful business. You may have heard of it. I call it sensory overwhelm in both touch and taste. Frito-Lay brands enter your mouth and slap you awake with sensory overwhelm, and that is not an accident. It's the core of all junk food product design. It is a circus, a carnival, for the crudest mouth sensations, the primordial ones in the brain stem. Sweetness, saltiness, fattiness, cheap grease from seed oil. Look, sensory design also includes how a package is held and used. Ever played with a Pringles can before? You lie. Sound is probably the most under-discussed sense within the CPG sensory design universe, unless we are in the realm of crunch. Good crunch is about sound as much as texture, right? And most snack food developers, they deal with it very seriously. Trust me, go have coffee with one. They'll tell you all about it. Look at how fast Takis grew to compete with its cousin Cheetos. It had the same Cheetos crunch, but it delivered a spicier, more modern junk food flavor range, right? And so Gen Z now had something that they could claim as their own Cheetos experience because Cheetos are too boomer. That's going to be the title of my shorts. Cheetos are too boomer. In food and beverage, even consumers with average educational attainment, okay, and zero class pretense, as adorable as they are incredibly dilettantish about how these substances feel inside their mouths, on their tongues, etc. So we all can parse ridiculously small amounts of variation from a technical perspective in the sensory experience of food and beverage. Small amounts of sweetness, small degrees of saltiness, slightly stale versus rock-like spoiled, aromas of herbies, When consumers answer open-ended questions about quote-unquote taste, like the word taste, they often reply with descriptions of texture, not just flavor. I've done market research before, so I know this. Trust me. We're all very fluent at describing negative texture experiences. Very fluent at that. Pulp in me juice. Unexpected bits and chewy things in me beverages. Clumps where clumps should not be. Slimy bits in our chicken bites. You know? It's not just the 6-year-olds, okay? And on and on and on. But less so, we're less picky in describing precisely what we desire. We're less precise. We're less capable in communicating in language what we don't want in terms of texture. We struggle. We either know it when we eat it or use it, or we don't. Now, one of the more interesting sensory brand winners in the ecosystem of emerging high-growth brands in the last 10 years is one we've already completely forgotten. Popcorners. Okay, Popcorners chips was purchased quietly by Frito-Lay several years ago after scaling pretty fast on the ramp. Now, from the outside of the package, Popcorners chips looks barely innovative at all. It looks pointless. It looks sad until you eat it. So please go buy a pack and tell me if I'm wrong in the comments. The air popping process alters the taste sensation in your mouth, and it's just fun to eat. The chip crushes down as you chew it, unlike any other chip you've ever had. And that mixes air together with the chip. And that, I swear, it appears to me that it enhances the aroma of the seasonings. I'm not totally sure. I'm not a food scientist, but it's a very memorable chip experience in a good way. And these are very small sensory differentiations from tortilla chips. Right? And it doesn't strike you, popcorner, as related to any of the other $8 billion Frito-Lay power brands. It really is unique in the mouth, but it's very hard to communicate how it's unique. I just failed at doing it. Okay? It achieved memorable tactile sensation. That's all I can say in language to communicate what it did. I call it the law of popcorners. Now, I didn't have space to include this law in the second edition of my book, but it does matter, and it matters a lot in snack food. And you can't just hire some dumb co-man with a snack extruding gun and just have at it. You've got to think about every aspect of the sensory experience. And you need to think about it even more than you did with your packaging callouts, which you overthought after you read my book. Sensory design can enhance repeat purchase rate, thereby making every additional household acquired by marketing that much more financially lucrative. Okay, so I don't care if you're starting your marketing spend out of the store on day 1 or day 10,531. You are going to get more return. You're going to accelerate velocities faster when you have a much more fanatical sensory experience that has a very high repeat and high buy rate. You're going to do this by combining sensory and symbolic innovation, like Dr. Squatch soap. That's the ultimate prize with which founders can command a premium and accelerate revenue really fast off a small, growing consumer base. Now, if you then, on top of that situation, which is product design driven growth, if you can add world-class marketing to the menu, to the recipe, you can achieve hyperbolic growth, like my friends at Squatch. This is yet another reason not to take R&D shortcuts before you launch or before you start investing a lot of money in scaling up your business, especially in food, where the consumer possesses, I swear, enormous libraries of sublinguistic nuance that they will just totally destroy you with, slay you with, Gen Z, as they make choices. But these are sublinguistic variables that they just can't describe to you in English, and no one can, including me. And I've been in the industry for 25 years, so I quit. I give up. I can't do it. But I'm telling you, they're still there. Woohoo! Yeah! Please hit the subscribe button, folks, if you enjoyed this episode, and get more. Get them right away when they launch and go public every month on the 1st and the 15th of the month. Thank you, folks, and be safe out there.
Thanks for listening. Remember, Dr. Richardson has loads of resources for founders at premiumgrowthsolutions.com.